I'm going to call this meeting to order. I don't believe we have anyone that wants to speak during open forum. Would you please all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all for joining us this evening. All are present. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Michael. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Excuse me. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. These are items that are routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion. We have the financials of the check wire transfer disbursement summary, the wire transfer EFT and ACH banking activity, the bank reconciliation statement for November 2019, building bond investment reports, the monthly wire detail, monthly health dental wire detail, monthly check detail, and the monthly ACH detail. Approval of the school board minutes from the regular school board meeting on December 9th, the board study session on December 9th. Personnel list, items as listed are resignations, terminations, and non-renewals. The district retirements of Luann Stevens after 16 years of service, the candidates for employment, and the leaves of absence as listed. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Enrique. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. A resolution for the acceptance of gifts this evening. We have received donations from Allina Health for $2,166, from Andrea Hogsden PTC for $506.25, from Noah Dominic for $250, the Prior Lake Rotary for $1,528, and we have received a donation from a group of individual parents that have made a donation to assist with student meal debt. This list is not a complete list, but the people that we have on the list are Mike Overson from Mike Overson Mortgage Team, Anthony and Catherine Stimler, Matthew Schnacky, Carrie and Lucy, Amy and Stuart Nelson, and then additional donations by anonymous donors. And as I stated, the list is not complete, and I apologize for those that are not mentioned tonight. The donations are for the following amounts: Hidden Oaks, $2,990, Twin Oaks, $3,405, Five Hawks, $100, Grainwood, $100, Westwood, $1,000, and an all-building donation of $850. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution regarding the acceptance of gifts?
So made.
By Michael, second.
Second.
By Mary. Any comments or questions? I just want to make one quick comment on the individual parent donations for the students' student meal debt. This was something that was a grassroots effort by parents in our community, and I'd like to thank them for their support. Appreciate helping out the kids that need help, so thank you. With that, it's a roll call vote. So Michael?
Aye.
Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
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 That motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Now we'll move on to Laker Pride. And it's the Glendale Elementary Showcase.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Tonight we have some Laker leaders with us from Glendale Elementary. If you would please make your way up. We also have Glendale's Dean of Students, Lisa Manders, and Elementary Principal Jennifer Molitor with them. I want to thank them all for being here. I also want to thank their parents for being here this evening. Students, yeah, we'll get you right up in front. Christy, is this it's okay if they're here? Will the camera pick them up, or do they need to be more front and center?
Scoot over this way a little bit.
Excellent. And I know that these exemplary leaders are each going to share a little bit about some of what they've been doing this year. And what I would ask you to do is, as you share, will you also let us know your name as you start? You probably practiced it that way. Okay, perfect. We're so glad you're here tonight. We can't wait to hear from you. Go ahead. Like I said, I'm going to give it to Lisa to start.
I'm Lisa Manders, the Dean of Students at Glendale, and I have the privilege of working with these 8 students as well as 10 more who are our Laker leaders this year at Glendale. All 5th graders have the opportunity to apply to be a Laker leader in the fall. And students are chosen based on their leadership in the school and in the community, and also their ability to show their CARES. CARES is an acronym we use that stands for cooperation, assertion, responsibility, empathy, and self-control. And so these are 8 exemplars right here that we have at Glendale. And we do a wide variety of things in the school, and they're going to give you a little bit of a picture of what some of the things that we do are.
I'm Caroline Cranes, and we began the year by doing a Leaders Think Can Are activity to teach and inspire us how to be leaders.
Delaney Holtz. Each month we have a CARES breakfast for students recognized for showing their CARES, and we help Miss Mulder and Miss Manders set up for breakfast and serve cinnamon rolls and juice.
Jordan Nevin, and we sometimes help pass out Laker Pride tickets to students who are caught showing Laker Pride.
I'm Cubby Sam Brew. When the weather turned colder, we created a video about recess and lunch expectations with cold weather and snow.
In February, I'm Emma. In February, during Kindness and Service Week, we'll be planning a linear food drive at Glendale's Historic Community.
I'm McKenna Norby, and last year other ways the Laker leaders helped including write notes of appreciation to staff, organizing pennies for patients, and helping with kindergarten tours.
I'm Dyla Palafox. Right now, we're working on making a video for each one of the CARES.
And I'm Claire Kerrigan. We signed up for smaller groups and planned out our videos. Our first video was on the City of CARES, cooperation, and we'd like to show it to you now. Hi, we're some of your Laker leaders. Today we're going to be telling you about the first letters in CARES. The first letter is C. C stands for cooperation.
When you cooperate, you have to work together.
Yeah, that's all okay.
Thank you. Include others. Share.
Remember to cooperate and show CARES.
Thank you very much for listening and just having a little bit of a picture of these awesome kids and how they serve our school community at Glendale.
Thank you very much for being here. And we have a certificate of appreciation from the school board for each one of you so that you know how much we appreciate your leadership and the way that you're helping to make sure your entire school community is absolutely one that truly does care. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Okay, move on to personnel items. Jim, do you have anything to add tonight? Okay. Moving on to unfinished business, facility planning and construction. Is that Jim Dowell?
Good evening, Chair Shimmick, School Board, Dr. Stallo. I have before us a latest round of equipment bids for Greenwood Elementary. And there was a question posed to me over the weekend on the discrepancy of what would be the apparent low bid for air handler equipment to TMS Johnson. That equipment did not meet our spec, both in size and weight and engineering. So we are going to recommend that we approve Schwab. So going through the bid items, bid line 1 is air terminal units. 2, Midwest Mechanical Solutions in the amount of $1,410. Boilers and accessory to Mulcahy in the amount of $77,122. Bid line 3, cabinet displacement units going to Schwab in the amount of $138,670,000. And package rooftop units, rooftop energy recovery units in equipment screening also to Schwab in the amount of $232,800. So we recommend to the school board that we approve the following bids in the amounts totaling $455,697.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the bids as described?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Jonathan?
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
I was just gonna point out the amount on bid line 4, on the letter. If we're going with the SVL, I think the quantity.
Yep, you're correct. I'm
Okay,
sorry for
needs to be
that.
238, yeah, okay. I just
so
wanted to
with
make
that-
sure we got the correct amount.
Thank you. And this has all been presented also to Florp.
Okay, that was my only.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for
Clarification.
catching that.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Jim. Moving on to new business, strategic direction 1, increasing measurable student learning and reduce achievement gaps as we provide equitable student opportunities through personalized learning and student engagement. This is 1D with the MTSS framework.
Good evening, Chair Shimmick, board members. We're proud to be here tonight to present the work we've been doing with multi-tiered systems of support and developing those processes in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. I'm joined tonight by our Director of Student Support Services, Deb Anderson, our Director of Research, Continuous Improvement, and District Improvement, Kristin Goodman. So the purpose of this presentation is to give you a status update on the work we've been engaged in for the last 2 years. And you will hear us talk about systems and processes and large-scale district work that we're doing, but the bottom line is this is about kids. This is about really developing our processes and making them better to serve all of our students, from our youngest learners in early childhood to our oldest learners in high school. And both our students who are succeeding very well in our system and our students who might need a little more support or enrichment to really achieve their full potential. This work is rooted in our strategic plan, again, in strategic direction 1, that is all about increasing measurable student learning and reducing achievement and opportunity gaps through equitable student opportunities through personalized learning and student engagement, and in strategic direction 5 around providing a safe, secure, and supportive student environment that nurtures the social and emotional well-being of all learners.
All right, and we were here last spring, or some of us were, providing a brief update on where MTSS was at in the spring. And in front of you now is the timeline of kind of, it's updated from last spring regarding where we're at. We have, since our update last spring, we have completed the CARE audit, and all of that information has been shared with staff and administrators. Each of our buildings has developed an MTSS leadership team, as well as, which serves also as their building instructional leadership team. And we are in the process of developing an MTSS process guide, as well as putting in place some of the building plans, which are integrated with skips in each building as well. We have broken the CARI plan out into kind of a 5-year implementation process so that we are continuing to address things moving forward. The reason why we need MTSS in the district is because we know student performance varies. So we need that differentiated instruction. We need to make sure our universal design or that instruction for all students is solid in all tiers. We need to make sure our instruction is evidence-based, as well as our interventions being evidence-based, that we are continuously measuring and monitoring both our students and our adult performance, and then making sure that we're using that data to help us in making decisions as we move forward with students. This was also part of, MTSS is also embedded into the ESSA plan as well. This particular slide is is a very powerful slide for us as a teaching and learning team. And we have used the information on this to really work with our administrators and teams in talking about how do you shift mindset. So MTSS is really looking at how do we shift the mindset from our staff of thinking it's one person or one team to knowing that it's bigger than that. Assessment looks different in MTSS. Universal screeners, the purpose of them and how those are embedded. So this particular slide we worked last week with at our administrative team meeting with our administrators on talking about where we started and where we are at now. And the really nice thing about it and the cool thing was everybody in the room could talk about shifts that they've seen in mindset since we started our work with MTSS. So we're moving in the right direction.
Thanks. MTSS is made up of 5 main different components, and I'm going to go into each of these in a little bit more detail in the coming slides. But overall, it's made up of the assessment, so the different tests that students might take. The information from those tests is used to make data-based decisions. We then use those decisions in the classroom with our multi-level instruction. Infrastructure and support is what supports all of this process. And then we go through a process of fidelity checking and evaluating to make sure that what we're doing is having the desired effect. So that's part of that cycle of continuous improvement right there. So starting out with assessments, the assessments are basically different tools that we use to find out about where students are in many different aspects. We screen all of the students so that we can make sure that no one's getting overlooked. We're picking up on any changes in the data that we see. We also have some progress monitoring tools for the students who might need some more intensive or smaller group instruction. And then we have a process so that teams of teachers and administrators are looking at and using that information to continue to make good decisions and have the right support at the school and classroom level. That data-based decision-making that I was talking about earlier, it really relies on some solid processes so that people have a routine to go through as they get any new set of data and they're, able to access that data from whatever systems we're using. And the main reason we have that is to be able to be responsive to student need.
Multi-level instruction is a key component of MTSS in that our universal tier instruction should support the needs and the learning of about 80% of our students, but we know that that universal tier, even though it's strong and research-based, may not support the needs of all learners. That's why we have supplemental tier 2 and tier 3 more intensive interventions, both for students who need additional support and for students who need additional enrichment. In terms of infrastructure and support, these are big changes, and these are difficult changes, and a lot of these involve adaptive change. So when we think about some of the organizational structures that we need, it's imperative that we communicate clearly and well and frequently with parents and with staff. Our staff has been involved from this process from the very beginning. When we first started the MTSS audit, every single staff person in the district had an opportunity to provide input and feedback into our current structures, what was working, what wasn't, and how we could potentially make it better. They participated in surveys, they participated in focus groups, and now we've started to develop our building MTSS teams. They've had some intensive professional learning with Carrie from the U of M at the beginning of the year, and we're also going to continue that work with our district MTSS team to help them be a part of this process and to help them provide input and feedback to guide us along the way. We have a rough map of the next 4 to 5 years, but again, that's going to change and adapt according to the needs of our teachers and our teams. When we think about schedules and resources, it's really aligning our time and money and resources to the needs of our students. When we think about teams, those are some of those learning teams, those individual grade level teams in our buildings, the building MTSS teams and building leadership teams, as well as our district administration and MTSS teams. And leadership, as we know, is incredibly important. So we're spending really the balance of our teaching and learning meetings with our administrators, peer coaches, and teaching and learning teams on really building their capacity to understand and lead MTSS in the district. That knowledge, of course, is key as well. So we are really focusing a lot of our professional learning, both from Carrie and the U of M and also internally on MTSS and the systems that we know we need to support that. We're front-loading that heavily so that our administrators and our peer coaches and our other leaders can have that capacity to lead that as we get deeper in. For fidelity and evaluation, as Kristlyn mentioned, it's really important as we use our existing processes and systems for continuous evaluation and continuous improvement to see if our curriculum instruction is working. As we engage in curriculum review with English or social studies or science, we always look at what is the end result, what is our current system producing, and are we happy or are we okay with those results, and how do we need to change that? We look at those through an equity lens in terms of who is winning in the current system and who might be underserved. We just convened a meeting of a district assessment evaluation team to really look at what are our current bank of assessments that we use district-wide, and how are they serving us? How can we get more out of them? How can we help our teachers access the data and use the data from those to make better instructional decisions? So we're getting their input on that as well. Evaluation, we're developing both a district and building level action plans, and it's really important to both make sure we have fidelity to the implementation, because if we don't have fidelity, we know the results won't be what we want them to be. And that is really a part of that SCIP and built process that we have in place too, evaluating the plan, evaluating the implementation, but also reviewing of student and implementation data each year. This slide points to two key points too. One, that MTSS doesn't stand by itself. It's a part of the larger work of the district related to personalized learning, related to equity in terms of providing equitable student experiences for all of our students. And it also points to the fact that we don't stand alone as a district in working on this big strategic and important change. So you'll see Reimagine Minnesota. That is really the work of districts across the metro and superintendents across the metro working in collaboration through AMSD to really reimagine what can an equitable quality student experience look like for all students, and how do we really work together to make some of those opportunities possible? How do we work across districts to establish a common vision and some best practices related to personalized learning, related to educational equity, and related to MTSS? And our next steps, we are convening the district MTSS team. They will meet this Wednesday, and we'll meet roughly quarterly to get input and feedback from them to guide our plans along the way. We're going to analyze and really process the recommendations from that assessment audit that I mentioned, and think about any changes or adaptations or improvements we want to make in the system. We will begin and continue the process of really planning and developing professional learning related to MTSS. Really, that looks like how do we help our teachers have the resources, the tools, and the capacities and the knowledge to make instructional decisions on the fly for what's working for a student or what's not working for a student, and be able to have a really confident bank of tools so that they can be proactive. We're also in alignment with that, developing a framework of Tier 1 class-wide interventions that teachers can call upon when the need arises. That can include assessment, small grouping, differentiation, strategy banks, so that everyone has those resources at hand. Thank you.
This is a report this evening. Does anyone have any questions for our group? Mary?
I do. Who's on the E through 12 MTSS team, and how often do they meet and when?
So it's a representative team. We have members from every building. We also we're very careful to represent counselors, to represent primary teachers, intermediate teachers. We have social work, we have intervention teachers, we have some administrators from each level, we have math, science, we have all the various content areas represented. So it's a representative team from both a level standpoint, a content area standpoint, and an expertise or interaction with students standpoint. We're meeting we plan to meet roughly quarterly, perhaps a little bit more frequently in the rest of this year as we get some of the big pieces moving. And then the team, we really hope to be both a channel for us to get input and feedback, but also a channel for us to really kind of educate and help people understand the broader system better too.
I'm going to ask a question, follow on. Is quarterly enough for something this large?
I think now, we will, so we're meeting with them for the first time this Wednesday. So that's one of the things we will ask. It's a time commitment, no doubt. So we may meet more frequently, depending on some of the big work we're engaging in this year. As we get into next year and perhaps further on, I think a quarterly cadence will make sense, but we will adapt to what we need, to be honest with you.
I have one additional question, if I can ask on that, because
Okay.
last year you presented this and you had the umbrella. And so the impression was, and the reason why I'm asking these questions is and something I didn't ask during the curriculum meeting, so it's just dawning on me now, so I apologize for that, but that is the umbrella effect actually, since it's incorporating so much of our current initiatives under one, does that mean there'll be less overall individual meetings on the individual initiatives and more on the comprehensive one?
Hopefully. We want our teachers, they're the most skilled and best people to be in front of our students every day. So we want them to be empowered, to be leading great learning in front of our students every day. So we are really careful to limit either subbing people out or pulling them from other meetings or pulling them into, the mornings or afternoons or evenings. So that's something we certainly hope to do to help people see the connections, to help people see how, our work with SEL that you'll hear about in just a few minutes, how that interacts and supports MTSS and supports personalized learning. They are intertwined innately.
Stacy?
I guess I just have a couple questions. When you talked about continuously measure student and adult performance, what did you specifically mean about adult performance?
So that might be fidelity to performing interventions. Our teachers or staff continuously using, the recommended intervention materials or resources. Are they using district-approved resources to meet the needs of students, or are they, so it's some of those pieces Are we using our building MTSS teams to the best of their abilities by meeting frequently, by reviewing student data at the building level, by making instructional, so it's some of those pieces about that adult performance, both of our leaders in MTSS and of our teachers, counselors, social workers, and really supporting the system.
And then I know you kind of alluded to it at the beginning when Deb was talking just about,
I don't have an opinion on it.
Sorry. She's obviously
Siri
wanting to
has
talk
no
to me
opinion.
right now. Sorry about that. I bumped it. The mindset shifts from and to, like to see the progression and the change in mind shifts. So since this is like a 5-year thing, when you come back next year to report, what are some signs or things that we can see along the way or as you report in a year that we can see as signs of success, that we know that this is working? Like what are some next steps that we hope to see?
Absolutely. I think within some of those mindset shifts, it's efficacy. A lot of it is rooted in both individual and collective efficacy, like do the members of the building instructional leadership teams, the building MTSS teams, do they feel like they can lead and move some of this work forward? And are they, doing some of the things that would show evidence of that through maybe leading professional learning in their buildings, maybe questioning some current practices or reevaluating some current practices, so kind of taking charge of that. And that's the same with teachers. Are they using some of the resources or differentiation resources we're building and will continue to build? Are they seeing the results with students? So a part of it is that owning all kids, honestly, and really saying, the kids in front of me are mine, and I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure that they succeed, even to a greater extent than they do now. Through us really providing more clarity around resources, more clarity around capacity, to improve their capacity to use some of these different differentiation resources. So I think those are some of the markers. We should see more students served by a high level and quality tier 1 instruction. We should see some of those things start to emerge. Some of these, these are big, meaty changes here, so they may take some time to emerge, but we should see that begin to emerge.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think you're up again.
I certainly am.
Under Strategic Direction 5, provide a safe and secure, supportive environment that nurtures the social and emotional well-being of all learners.
All right, Chair Schimmick, Dr. Stallo, members of the board, thanks for letting us come forward to give you a brief update on social emotional learning here in Prior Lake Savage area schools. I'm going to start by setting the stage for you to tell you a little story that I hope will help you understand the why of social emotional learning. And I want to tell you the story of Johnny, a 5th grade student who went home from school one day, went home, heard his parents arguing that evening after dinner up in his bedroom. He didn't sleep well that night after hearing all the arguing that was going on. And in the morning, he overslept, so his mom had to wake him up multiple times, yelling, "Johnny, come on, come on. We got to get going. You're going to miss the bus." Well, he barely made it. He made it to the bus. The bus driver said, "Come on, Johnny, let's go. I've got to get the route to school on time." Then he gets to school and starts thinking about, "God darn it, did I remember my lunch?" And so stops in the playground and is digging through his backpack going, "Okay, yep, I have my lunch." So then he walks into the school, goes into the classroom. 5th grade teacher says, "Johnny, where's your homework from last night?" And Johnny loses it and starts yelling and screaming and going, "How can you ask me those things?" And teacher says, "You know what, Johnny, it's not appropriate for you to talk to me that way. We're going to head down to the principal's office." So they go down to the principal's office, and the principal says to Johnny, he looks at Johnny and said, "What's wrong with you? And why are you, what's wrong with you?" So the whole point of social emotional learning is to shift our thinking from what's wrong with the student to what happened to the student. It isn't about what's wrong with our students. It's about things that happen to our students that come out the next day sometimes when they come to school. And that's a very powerful message, I think, for us to hang on to. In the board packet, there were a number of videos, and so the video might have been better than the story I just told, but we opted not to show the videos tonight for the sake of time that we have here today. But I really want you to hang on to that story as we move forward and talk about social emotional learning.
This work is also rooted in our strategic plan, as you see and as you remember. Strategic Direction 5, really around providing a safe, secure, and supportive environment that nurtures the social and emotional well-being of all learners. That was brought forward by the community. Over 150 community members joined us in November of 2018 for the strategic plan refresh, and really brought that to the surface, said we need more support for both our teachers and all of our learners to provide social emotional learning for all students. And you will see that priority work goal for this year was really conducting that audit of social and emotional learning resources, curriculum, structures, to use to guide our future work. So we are presenting the results of that tonight. As with MTSS, SEL really links into our work with personalized learning and MTSS. SEL is based in the inherent knowledge that students are people and not just vessels to be filled with academic knowledge. And they're complex human beings whose learning and behavior are just as impacted by emotions and everything they bring to our classrooms every day as the quality of instruction and discipline. So when we think of personalized learning, that is what that is rooted in as well. Students are people and learning is personal and relational.
So what is social emotional learning? There are 5 different areas of social emotional learning. There is self-awareness, self-management, that responsible decision-making, those relationship skills that we build, and just social awareness. So when you look at that graphic in front of you, social emotional learning is more than just in our classrooms. It can start in the classroom, it's a school, it's the community, it's all of us when it comes to social emotional learning. And it goes out to partner with all of those different areas, including families and communities as well.
All right, I'm here to talk a little bit about the research side of things. And to let you know that social emotional learning has had a lot of research done over the last number of decades. And there's some things we can say about it that's been proven over and over again about how as a universal approach used for all students, it really does have positive impacts on student achievement. So that's the academic outcomes that benefit from this for students. It creates better, equitably balanced schools and communities, and students actually gain some of the skills that they need beyond just being able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide for the real world. Excuse me. Social emotional learning isn't mental health treatment, but academic and social emotional learning really are interrelated and they're interdependent. The cognitive part of learning really is dependent on that social emotional part of learning, and that's what's been proven and researched time and time again, and why it's really important that we make sure that we have opportunities available for our students to build their social emotional capacities as well as their academic.
So the Minnesota Department of Ed has adopted SEL standards, and those have been based on the CASEL standards. And CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. And so those standards that MDE has adopted are set up like language arts, math standards, their competencies that are defined, outlined, there are learning goals attached to them under each one of the competencies, and there are set expectations for what we want our students to be able to learn, to be able to do for each one of those competencies. Social and emotional learning is also part of Minnesota's ESSA plan. So we started this fall talking about looking at how do we develop our own audit to find out what's going on within our district. So we gathered input and feedback from principals, counselors, social workers, chemical health coordinators, health services, school psychs, to really look at what are our core programs and services that we offer, and what are those specialized programs and services that we also have available to meet the SEL needs of students. We came together, we looked at what those existing programs and practices were that we could build upon. We tried to identify where those gaps were in terms of programming, in terms of practices, and policies that we may need to change. And then we also looked at resources that really can help us to maximize the impact of social emotional learning here in the district. So we asked questions such as what resources are in our schools and our community? How do staff, students, families access them? Do they know they're available out in our community? Identifying school programs and supports as well. What are those? Is every teacher in the district aware of what those are and how they access those? So what we started to do, or what we are in the process of doing too, is putting together, we had staff do a program description, where that program is located, who's that targeted group that that particular resource is targeted to, how often is it delivered, what's the capacity. So really asking some additional questions of our staff of the resources that we do currently have available within the district.
Hello. The SEL conversation that we're having today, we just want to really make it clear that social emotional learning doesn't stand on its own, but it's actually integrated and part of our MTSS system. So there's social emotional learning and academic learning, and both of those are happening in the same, or with the same processes. So we're looking at data, we're making decisions based on that, and excuse me.
Right. And we couldn't let the evening end without having just pointing out the difference between social emotional learning and positive behavior interventions and supports. All of our sites in the district are PBIS sites. At early childhood level, it's called the pyramid model, and then goes all the way. Every building is somewhere along that PBIS journey, including bridges as well. And really the difference that we want staff to be able to take away is PBIS is really focusing on teaching productive expected behaviors. And SEL is really focusing on developing, how do you help kids to develop the competencies that they need in order to do PBIS or to follow PBIS of those productive behaviors. So the two are intertwined, and we need solid footing in both of those areas as we move forward. So what the next couple of slides you're going to see that we're going to briefly go through, we took a look at in all of our areas, early childhood, elementary, middle school, and high school, what is it that we do currently have in place in terms of SEL? So universal, I'll speak directly to early childhood, and then we'll go through those other areas as well. The first and most important one is that universal tier 1. So what is the research-based practice or practices that we have for providing SEL to support all students? And in early childhood, that looks like the pyramid model. That is what we're all working on there. For students who need a little bit extra, again, we're kind of following that MTSS protocol that we shared about in the last presentation. We know that there are going to be some students who need that additional support in addition to the universal instruction that they receive. And typically that looks like a smaller group where interventions are really matched to individual student needs, and then data, we collect data on that to determine if what we're doing is working or not working. We also know that there may be students who need even more intensive interventions, and that would be the tier 3. And right now, you see that's kind of empty at early childhood. That's part of the gaps that we're finding in the district that we are going to continue to work to develop. And when you get to tier 3, usually you're looking at one-to-one interventions that are the most intensive interventions that we provide as a district. Then we had we looked at some of the things that we were doing, sitting down with building leaders to talk about what are the positives in the things, what are you seeing as the positives, and what are you seeing as areas for improvement in each of those areas as well.
In elementary, continuing on, you'll see PBIS as a unifying component as well. Responsive classroom, all of our teachers are trained in responsive classroom. The morning meetings that start the day is a key part of that system, and Second Step. Second Step is a research-based SEL curriculum that we've recently made an investment in through a grant from the state to really update and standardize our resources across teachers so that all teachers have access to those. Supplemental Tier 2, again, are smaller interventions, more intensive, and Tier 3 as well. Those are delivered by social workers or deans or other outside service providers. We have a strong system and foundation with Responsive Classroom. Second Step is widely popular, and it's really in all our elementary schools. It's research-based. We have some work to do with variance and delivery model, really determining what are the best practices and bringing that to students across all of our buildings.
All right, in the middle school, looking at that universal Tier 1 support that is provided for all students, we have the PBS, so Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, along with Growth Produces Success, called GPS, and Where Everyone Belongs, which is the WEB. Those are in both middle schools, and the Growth Produces Success is aligned with the CASEL standards that Deb talked about earlier, so Minnesota State standards. The supplemental Tier 2 and Tier 3 individual supports are provided by different staff members depending on needs of students. So that might be guidance counselors, deans, administrators, all depending on what sorts of needs students are determined to have and availability, how that all works together. At the high school, there's a similar setup with what happens at the universal Tier 1, and we're also exploring some other social emotional supports at all levels to figure out how we can expand that. Again, those additional supports and individual supports provided by different staff depending on student needs.
All right. One last comment on when you look at that Tier 1, Tier 2, keep in mind that Tier 1, that universal, don't think of it can be a lot of people. So guidance counselors don't necessarily fall into Tier 2. All of our students have access to guidance counselors. If you look at school social workers, they can fall into multiple tiers, just depends on what they're doing and what that intervention looks like that they're delivering. So I just wanted to point that out. In terms of implementation, it's not necessarily, when we look at SEL, it is not going to, we're not going to implement something, it's not going to be achieved through a program or curriculum that we purchase or an add-on lesson. We are really working at how do we embed that into part of our schools. So you can walk in our schools and feel that students are welcome, they're cared about, there are supports that are in place for them social, emotionally, and academically. In terms of implementation of best practices and next steps, developing a vision, prioritizing the academic and social emotional learning as part of MTSS. We conducted that SEL resources audit to really help see what's currently in place and where those gaps are. The next steps in the process are really looking at designing and implementing effective professional development to build that capacity within our staff for the academic and the social emotional, as well as adopting evidence-based programs for academic and social emotional learning standards across all grade levels. Integrating those, the social emotional learning at all 4 levels, starting with the early childhood level all the way through the high school, establishing a process to continuously improve academic and social emotional learning, as well as we are doing some work in terms of adopting a universal SEL screener. There are a couple of sites that are piloting that currently, and then really continuing to develop consistency in school-wide practices. As Kevin shared, this is big work, and so it is, consistency can sometimes be challenging when you look at that. But it's good to see the progress that we've made and that we can share up to date. Any questions?
Also is a report, so are there any questions? Michael?
Two quick ones. First of all, is there a place for student input, especially at the middle and high school level, when you're looking at it? Because sometimes they're the quickest to point out where the holes are.
And you have been doing some work. Last week you were at the high school.
Yeah, so we've perhaps talked about a bit about the caring and committed conversations that Prior
Sure,
Lake High
that's
School's
one thing
leading.
I was thinking
So,
of.
and they're telling us straight, as
Okay.
students do, about some of the gaps they see, some of the things that their teachers do that they love and that make them feel welcome, that make them feel cared about, and that make them want to achieve even more, and some of the things that maybe make them feel more isolated. So we're identifying some key leaders within that group to help us provide ongoing feedback and input, and we're also working to cycle teachers through those conversations just so they can kind of hear it straight from the students too.
And maybe is related to counselors too, and that sort of thing. Great. And then is this related to some of the research growing about trauma-informed teaching as well?
Absolutely.
The ACEs, yes, it is, very much so.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Stacy?
I guess somewhat of a comment that I just want to make sure I'm understanding right. But out of both of these reports, it seems to me that the underlying theme that we're getting is that people have to take ownership. Like, you know, I think a lot of times we hear, oh, put more counselors, oh, put more staff. And that there's this mind shift. I'm not just saying at Prior Lake Savage, I'm saying statewide or nationwide
Right.
anyway, that we all can take part in this. So I see that as kind of the challenge, because I think we are so quick to identify that, you know, this is this person's job, or I'll do this here and this, because we've had these other systems in place. And so I guess I'm going to ask somewhat of the same question that I asked on the other report is, you know, a year from now, what do you hope to have as far as successes in this area, you know, that we see improvement with social emotional learning? Because I know they're tied together, but, you know, specifically to social emotional learning.
You know, my hope would be that we can have staff be able to share the collaborative nature that you're talking about, that we need to have in place, that staff would have a built confidence, that efficacy piece too that Kevin talked about, because I think you're right in that we have had over the years siloed systems, and we know that that's not working. And so how do we bring it together? And I think we'll achieve that, or we'll know what we're doing is working, because we're going to see that result in terms of teachers being able to address it and talk about it confidently, as well as students. You know, when you look at our student survey results and stuff too, I would hope that we would see it there in student surveys, as well as what parents are reporting in terms of survey results.
Thank you. I think this is really important work, and so I really appreciate the amount of time and effort we're putting into this, so.
Questions? Mary?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the story that you told in the beginning. That kind of helps put it into perspective. But to kind of dovetail on what Stacy just said, there is you know, obviously we want to be more holistic and tie everything together, because we're dealing with the whole student, not just pieces of them. But at the same time, I don't want this to diminutize the need for social workers and extra counselors.
Definitely.
Because as we put more emphasis into the ability for individual instructors and educators to handle the behaviors in a more productive way, you still are dealing with one person handling it for a class, and it is disruptive. They need that support. They need to be able to have the resources to help that child right there, so they can not distract from the other children or students that have similar issues. And so I'm very concerned about putting more emphasis on having an individual teacher own more and more of the whole process. rather than understanding how the whole process works together and then knowing their role in it. I think there's a huge distinction there. And the other thing is as they get to middle and high school, and I've said this multiple times, you do have instructors that only see, and individual adults in the environment that only see a child for an hour a day maybe, or maybe an hour every other day even. And so trying to put that big picture together for all the children and all the students as they get older becomes more difficult. And you do need extra resources in there to take the feedback from the individual educators as they're seeing the students in their environment that they control, to put the big picture together. So again, I don't want this process to, again, I want to use the term diminutize the need for additional social workers and counselors.
I would see it as more of a partnership, because as you know, when you look at social workers, guidance counselors, school psychologists, they have a little bit different background or training. And so how do we get them to share some of those pieces as well, share more of that, so that we can work together better in a partnership rather than saying, yep, this is the one person. I agree that you're right in that somebody's got to take the lead in challenging situations, and then how do we address some of it proactively too, more proactively than we currently are.
Any other, Jonathan?
I interpret some of this as really just building a culture and changing a culture a little bit, enhancing it. And for each of us, I think it can be really helpful when we get opportunities to be in the buildings, because you do get to see some of these things going on. Last week, when Dr. Stahlo and I were at Glendale, I feel like I saw PBIS and responsive classroom, and as a board member, I have a far greater appreciation of what those things are from having been a part of a morning meeting in an elementary classroom and kind of see what they're doing. I think from here, there is kind of an instinct, I think, to want to talk about staff and to want to talk about making sure we are properly staffed in different positions. I think the cultural part as the first step and continuing to analyze our improvement is invaluable and can help us get a handle on if and what is needed.
Thank you.
And I was just making one more point. You kind of allude to it here. We didn't really talk about it, but I think families, really engaging with our families too, because a lot of these practices, I just think of how I parented 20 years ago or 25 years ago, how they're parenting now. There is such changes. I think it would be really, of all different kinds of community partnerships, of just, what are some of these strategies that we can use to help kids out. So I think that's going to be a real big part of it too, because the community as a greater whole sees a lot of kids all the time, especially my line work. That kind of stuff. We see a lot of it, and I could see a piece with our group being part of it.
It comes back to how do we collectively support
Right.
and work together on that.
So thank you.
I think it's also good discussion. I think as the saying goes, it takes a village, right? And I think that's where we're at. There are instances where we have to take kids to a different place for more help. But I do think it's important that the teacher in the classroom, especially at the elementary level, is in contact with what's going on with each kid for their day. I understand when a kid has repetitive behaviors, but every once in a while, your example, maybe that's the first time that's happened for that little boy, and he got penalized for it and he didn't know what to do with it. I think those are the kids, too, that I'm afraid sometimes we miss. They fall through the cracks, and eventually that one behavior becomes a habit. And to Stacy's point, maybe he needs to go back to the parents. This is how it's affecting your child. You know that. You know, as much as we don't want to be the one that has to do everything for every kid and the parent needs to be involved, we kind of end up being there. So I like the idea of the teacher being involved, and then when it's beyond what they can do, we have the counselors, we have the social workers to fall back on, and I agree with the partnership. I think that's a perfect way to describe what needs to happen for kids. Because not every kid is going to fall in or needs all of these things. But sometimes they might need something once in a while.
Exactly.
So I appreciate the work too. It's needed.
Just to add a couple things, I want to thank you as well. I know this has been a lot of heavy lifting. You've had a lot of voices in it, and we have a long way to go. I think the two things that I want to just remind the board and community as we continue working on this is, first of all, the importance of the community's input on our strategic planning process in November of 2018, and the recognition of the board understanding the responsibility that we have in terms of the social emotional learning pieces, recognizing also as we look at that strategic direction number 5 that came out of that strategic planning process, the social emotional learning is a piece, as well as the physical safety, which is a whole nother line of work we've been doing with our standard reunification, especially this year around that. So I wanted to thank the board and recognize the board for approving that strategic direction, because that is definitely driving the work that needs to be done in all of our classrooms. And I think the other thing that I just want to share is that notion, and I think we hear it both through the MTSS processes that we have in place and with the social emotional, is just that whole notion of building deep relationships with kids and with families and with colleagues in your own buildings and across the district and with district office and buildings, because you're right, that story that Deb started with, it could have been the first day. It could have been the third day. And that teacher and the relationship that that teacher has, or the office staff has, or the bus driver has, those people need to be sure that they're paying attention to that and saying, you know what, this kid seems, something's going on. This seems a little bit different. You know, we need to learn a little bit more so that we can support him. So just that the continual importance in building relationships and leaning into those relationships as we support kids and families will be our continued work as well. Thank you.
I believe that's everyone. Thank you. We'll move on to the Minnesota Student Survey results.
Good evening, Chair Schimmick, Dr. Stallo, and the board. Well, tonight I have some of the Minnesota Student Survey results for you. This is a really interesting moment. You get to see some of Scott County's results overall, some of Minnesota's, and then some of Prior Lake Savage's at the same time. The survey is given statewide to grades 5, 8, 9, and 11. It's a voluntary survey, so students can choose to take it or choose not to take it. It is delivered online. New questions are included every 3 years that the survey is given. And so if you're looking back over time, you would just want to check in and make sure that that same wording of each item has been the same to make sure you're making an accurate comparison. The student survey also has some different student groups than our usual federal demographics that we have, because it lets students self-identify in many different ways. So in addition to those categories, Black, Asian, Hispanic, there's also Somali, Hmong, many different identities that kids might have. And the data you're going to see today was compiled by Scott County from the Scott Family Net, and we want to thank them for that. This is also the longest running survey of students, been going since 1989, so it's really an interesting source of data that we can look at. The categories cover school, activity, family and relationships, different risk factors, health and safety, mental health, substance use, and sexual health. And not all of the items are asked of at every grade level. So we will start right in looking at the student participation in the Minnesota Student Survey, so you can get an idea of how many students are taking it, and it's well over 80% for the most part. A little dip in 11th grade, which is pretty common year on. But with this volume of students taking it, we can be really confident in those results that we're seeing. Let's see, we'll take a look at an item out of the home and family section. And so that item is how much do you feel your parents care about you? And we had really high positive ratings all across Scott County. So quite a bit, or very much, from 88 to 95% across Scott County. If we look at the school measures, we can see that there's a difference here between Scott County and Minnesota, with Scott County results being a little bit higher, with students who reported being bullying once or more in the last 30 days. And that level decreases as students age, it looks like. And then if we're going a little bit further into bullying for some reasons that students have been bullied, you can see comparisons between 2016 and 2019 results here, where there were two areas where that decreased. So there was less bullying in categories of gender expression and cyberbullying over the past 3 years. If we look directly at results in Prior Lake Savage from 2019 to 2016, we could look at adults in my school listen to the students. Such an important aspect, especially if we take the last two presentations into context about MTSS and social emotional learning. And this changed from 85 to 82% students responding positively. I would actually say is really stable, especially with the number of students taking that. And same thing here. At my school, teachers care about the students, with 90 to 91% of students answering positively there. That's really wonderful, and bodes really well for some of the social emotional aspects that we've already got in place in the district. I feel safe at school. That has changed a little bit since 2016, where it was 95%. In 2019, 87% of students reported feeling safe in the school. So that spread is enough that we can look at that and say that students really have reported, or really are feeling less safe at school overall. If we go into the health section a little bit, we can see that over 90% of students report feeling excellent, good, or very good, feeling like they're in good health. And this is where we can start to look at some of the disparities in the survey by race. So of the students who were rating their health as excellent or very good, that started out with 49%, 50% of students who might be Hispanic or multiracial reporting that, where 70% of white students reporting that they're feeling excellent or very good. Physical activity was another area in the health thing that came up. We're going to look at some of the disparities of that. So students who were physically active for 60 minutes or more for all the previous 7 days, about 20% of students reported that in Prior Lake Savage. And then this was an interesting part, where the females reported consistently across 3 years in Scott County that they were getting less physical activity over the last week. One of the positive results that came out of the survey was the reduction in texting while, or sending emails while driving. So going down just a little bit, but still going down, and that's always positive. Sleep, a really important aspect of health, because that also helps get students ready for learning that next day at school. And 4 out of 10 11th graders sleeping 6 hours or less per night. So we can't make a kid go to bed, but we can help inform them about what that does do when they're not ready for school in terms of sleep. If we move on to mental health, again tying into some of the other presentations we heard earlier, 23% of Scott County students have some type of long-term mental health, behavioral, or emotional problem that's defined as something that's lasting 6 months or more. And these are just some interesting statistics that I think really tie into that, so, or give us some more insight into it. So the feeling good about myself often has been declining. So from 86% of students across the county to 77% in 5th grade of kids often feeling good about themselves has declined in just 3 years. It is a different group of 5th grade students. Even so, like, we see that decrease across all of these different age groups. And then feeling valued and appreciated by others probably links into feeling good about themselves, and that's also declining. So like, the more types of social emotional learning activities we have at school, where we help students know how to thank their peers and encourage their peers and interact positively with their peers, can help their peers feel good about themselves. Looking at some of the disparities between different groups of students. So students who felt depressed or hopeless in the last 2 weeks, that was considerably higher among the LGBTQ population there. Also looking at males and females, and the percentage of students who felt depressed or hopeless in the last 2 weeks was much higher among females. As well as looking at students who are seriously considering suicide in the past year. And there are some risk and protective factors that impact student mental health. So like, while we look at risk factors, we also want to keep those protective factors. There are some studies that we will be able to look at in coming months on this data from the University of Minnesota, looking at developmental assets of students, developmental supports, and developmental challenges. And so sometimes those supports and assets that students already have can help balance out some of the risk factors that might be there. Moving on about looking at some adverse childhood experiences, as we talked about trauma-informed care in the classroom. So this gives us some information about students who've had one or more adverse childhood experience, and this data really tells us how important that trauma-informed care is and with what we do in the classroom. We also can look at substance use information. Of course, vaping has been in the news and is a really topical thing, and we can see right here how that e-cigarette use has really gone up over the past 3 years. And then something that I found particularly interesting was then how students rated how dangerous different substances might be. And it shows that students are considering marijuana to not be as risky as smoking packs of cigarettes. It's very interesting to see some student perspective, and that helps inform us for how we deliver instruction and what type of curriculum we look at. So overall, some takeaways where students have given us some indication of things improving, like that texting while driving decreasing, that perceived risk from smoking is increasing, the perceived risk from using prescription drug is increasing, cigarette use is decreasing, 9th grade alcohol and marijuana use is also decreasing, and then some of the information that we got back that was not quite as positive there was about that physical activity decrease, feeling safe at school, that vaping increase that I talked about, the perceived risk from using marijuana having decreased, students' emotional well-being decreasing, as well as some bullying increase that we've seen. Thank you so much. What kinds of questions might you have?
I have a question. Mary? Okay. Now, I've got a two-part question. One, with the Scott County survey, is there any part of the survey that Prior Lake Savage opted out of, or did we take the whole thing?
So it's actually the Minnesota student survey. These are just Scott County results, and then some of those were Prior Lake Savage area schools results. And the survey, it comes to students as it is as a whole, and students do not have to answer every question, so there may be questions that students don't answer or opt out of, and families can also decide to have their student not take the survey overall.
Right, but But when the survey's delivered, the whole thing is delivered?
That's right.
Okay. And then the second thing is now, outside of just the statistics that we're seeing in the county and the state, is there any correlation to reasons why certain things are going up or down, that we're seeing from, anything from, medical boards to psychology boards or anything like that?
I don't have anything with me this evening that would give us further insight about that, especially not specifically in Prior Lake. I just, this evening, only have the results of that survey information.
Because there's been, like in Psychology Today, Harvard Medical Review, et cetera, I mean, these have been fairly prominent topics, and they do have correlation to certain behaviors that have changed, particularly with elementary and middle school students, and I was just
You mean
wondering if
around device use, that kind of thing?
device use, something about there's a huge psychology article on the push for inner happiness instead of how they fit in with the community. That's been a theme that's been going on for like the last 5 to 8, 10 years maybe. And so students are a little bit more negative within themselves, and they're only focused internally. They're not getting out as much. I mean, there's been a lot of, obviously these have been going on nationally for a while now, and we don't seem to be that much different than the national average. And I was just wondering if that was considered, or is that something you're looking at? Some of those reasons and studies that have been out there as far as correlation to cause?
Sure. I think also specifically around what's happening or not happening within Prior Lake Public School or Prior Lake Savage area schools, that research needs to happen like more on the actual district level, like interviewing kids to find out more about some of their reactions in general. Like that, some of that information comes out from like the caring and I can't remember the other word. And committed conversations, right, which I was actually at last week. So like those are some places where we can get resources from, as well as like broadly from research that we might find.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for sharing the information.
Thank you so much.
Michael, did you have something?
No, I was.
Thank you for sharing the information.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the National School Counseling Week proclamation. I guess that's appropriate after this meeting. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools proclaims February 3rd to the 7th, 2020 as National Schools Counseling Week, and I have a proclamation. Whereas school counselors are employed in the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools to educate all learners to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of an ever-changing global community, and whereas school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to academic achievement, career awareness, and social-emotional development, and whereas school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children, and whereas school counselors collaborate with teachers, administration, and community resources to enhance and complement school counseling programs and help students succeed, and whereas comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school. Therefore, on behalf of the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, I do hereby proclaim February 3rd through the 7th, 2020 as National School Counseling Week. Okay, that's all there's with that. I'll move on to the approval of local control resolution. I believe Stacy and Michael are going to present that.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Before the holidays, I participated as a delegate in the MSBA Delegate Assembly, where school board members from across the state came together to vote on the policies MSBA would focus on going forth to our legislators. And they did ask at that time, based on the amount of discussion that was had about granting school boards more local control in making decisions or deciding how things would be enacted or carried out, that we would come back to you as a school board with a resolution supporting these efforts to allow more local control at the school board level. And so I don't know if we need to read through all of it. It was in the board packet.
We talked about it At our.
At our legislative
legislative
meeting.
Right before this, and we all agreed.
Supported it.
Supported it, so.
Yes.
I think
So-
it's something that, every year I've been on the board, we've talked about local control to our legislators, so I think the more and more we can do at a local level in decision-making, we kind of know what's best for our kids here, so.
I mean, each district is unique and has its own unique situations, and sometimes you cannot have universal ways of completing projects or meeting certain requirements based on your district. So our legislative committee did decide we were in favor of approving this and bring it to the board now for your thoughts.
Do I have a motion to approve the local control resolution?
So made.
So me.
Stacy,
Second.
second by Enrique. Any comments or questions?
One
Mary?
question, I always thought that we had the local control. This is not a new resolution, right? We've had it all along.
It's never been a resolution.
It's never been an
It's just
actual
been a
resolution.
word we use all the time, that we like to talk, and they like to talk about it too, because they like to talk about it on TV when they give it to us, so. Yeah, I mean, I think this is just kind of formalizing it.
Okay.
And they're looking for school boards across the state to adopt this resolution so they have more authority behind their asks at the legislative level.
I didn't realize it wasn't formalized or memorialized anywhere, but yeah.
Now it
Okay.
will be.
It will be. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Oh, this is a roll call. Michael?
Aye.
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 That motion passes 7-0. Moving on to policy. I asked Martha to print our governance policies. Stacy and I, when we were planning the agendas, were looking at the policies, and we made a few changes, very minor, and then have some comments on when we need to actually discuss more of some of the more major things we're looking at. We tried to take some of the things we talked about during the retreat last spring and incorporate them into the new policies. So we wanted to give them to you tonight so you have a chance to look at them, so that on the 27th we can have a good discussion on each one of them. These policies are the ones that govern us versus our other policies. Most of them are coming from other administrators, other parts of the district, but these are the ones that that we have the say in, I guess. Stacy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think, obviously it's just our thoughts, and it was just, we didn't put a lot down because we thought we'd have open discussion about it, so.
Okay. There is one thing I'd like you all to think about. In a lot of the MSBA policies, and I know a workshop that you were at, Stacy, mentioned about dating all the revisions as we have revisions to policies. And I think Martha spent some time going through all of that and found out when we've updated certain policies. Now, and the annual policies, I believe, are not necessary. We know they're annual. But sometimes our policies do change and the requirements for them. So if we want that historical part in the policies, that's something to think about when we have our discussion at the end of January. So, okay. Then with that, we'll go on to administrative reports. Dr. Stallo.
Thank you very much. At Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, our mission is to educate all learners to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of our ever-changing global community. As you heard tonight, our collective work is focused on that mission, and I'd just like to highlight a couple other things. Our online enrollment opens on January 16th, so we've been in heavy promotion mode to ensure parents know that we're opening online enrollment for the 2020-2021 school year on January 16th. This is especially important for our incoming families whose students will be the class of 2033. We're also offering an opportunity for incoming kindergarten parents and students to connect to kindergarten by visiting their school to see a kindergarten classroom, talk with teachers, and ask some questions. There will also be opportunities for parents to enroll their students at this event on February 3rd. And the only other thing that I wanted to highlight this evening is that Prior Lake High School has been named a top 5,000th STEM high school by Newsweek. Prior Lake High School was ranked 1,570th out of the 30,000 schools that were analyzed for this award. Newsweek partnered with STEM.org to rank America's best STEM high schools and gave top honors to schools that offer skilled teachers who who keep up with developments in the STEM fields and create dynamic learning environments to engage our students. So a nice recognition for the hard work of our staff, our teachers, and our kids every single day, and the partnerships that we have with our community. Thank you.
Are there any other administrative reports? Board reports. Enrique, did you have anything to report?
Nothing to report.
Mary?
Nothing.
I just had AMSD on last Friday with Dr. Stallo. And the only thing I'll just, she wrote some of it in her update this week. There's a link to it. But I would encourage everyone to take a look at AMSD's information. We had an interesting talk with Steve Grove, the the Commissioner of the Department of Employment and Economic Development, just kind of trying to just find pathways for Education E12 to kind of get into his group. It's a little different group, so sometimes they don't always mix, but they're trying to find connections and just the way the workforce is changing, demands, and how education has to change along with it was a good talk. But then the really, both speakers were good, but then we had the medical director from the Wellbeing at Health Partners and a senior program manager from Twin Cities Medical Society talk about vaping. And so they have a presentation on the website, and it's, in my opinion, it was quite shocking at the amount of youth using vaping and how it was really very much targeted towards youth. And this is going to be, I mean, I know it's something that our schools we deal with every day, but it's crazy. So I would just encourage you to go to the website. I can show you it if you want to stay after the meeting and show you the quick link. But the results and the just the growth from year to year of usage from like 8th grade, I mean, it's like doubled in like a year. I mean, it's crazy. So I think it's something that when we start talking to our legislators a little bit of it, it's something I'm going to start dropping in as far as, listen, we got to do something about this. We need, whether it be education or ways of prevention, because it is really becoming epidemic, and it was something that was specifically targeted towards our youth. So.
Stacy, the FDA did increase the age to 21, and we do have a legislative opportunity to talk to our legislators about getting that passed as a law within the state of Minnesota.
Yeah. So
this session.
Right. So I would just encourage you to kind of look at that information that was on EMSD. So.
Okay. Jonathan?
Had first FLIRP meeting. It was about 10 minutes last week, a nice short one. And spent Thursday morning at Glendale getting a firsthand look at what's going on.
Alyssa? Michael?
Two quick things. Early Learning Group had their preschool open house this evening. I was there before coming over here, and a number of parents and families going through, and some of the comments I overheard was they really wanted to get their kids started in preschool here, so that if they plan to commit to public education through 12th grade, they wanted to get a start now, so that was good to hear. And then secondly, not officially a committee, but Lee, I didn't get it to you in time, just want to share the date for the next community conversation on race. Some of us attended this a few months ago when it was sponsored by the city of Savage. Incredibly helpful evening with resources, people giving firsthand testimonials. The next one is February 12th. At 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at Harriet Bishop Elementary School. It is posted on Facebook and other sites. They do ask for an RSVP just so they can accommodate the number of people who've come. If you have any questions, Dr. Stahl or I could, and I believe Jeff, you were there, could answer questions about what the first evening was like. This will be a continuation.
On to future events. Oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to you sat here all night and I just forgot about you.
You're good,
so
no
quiet.
worries. So as the quarter is wrapping up, we're kind of in the thicket of it. We've got a nice long weekend coming up ahead of us, so I know a lot of high schoolers are excited for that, as well as the new cafe that opened. And I had seen Dr. Stallo had tweeted out some pictures, and I know a lot of people are really enjoying that. So it's really exciting kind of seeing all of the construction finally coming together. Looking ahead, we've got our snowball dance that's coming up. That's our winter dance on February 8th, and we have some of our first events coming up for that right at the end of January, so that's coming fast. And we've done a lot of changes this year to make it more inclusive and to open it up to hopefully more people and entice them to come, because in the past we've kind of hit a roadblock with having a Sweethearts dance kind of insinuates a certain message that we weren't as comfortable sharing anymore. And so we changed it to a snowball. It's not a Sadie's anymore. It's just kind of something to open up to anybody who wants to go. You don't have to go with a date. You can just bring a group. So we're hoping that encourages a higher attendance, as well as our royalty and coronation. We've actually transformed, and what we're doing is something similar to what prom does, where the teachers and staff they'll vote 3 people for each grade in hopes that we have inclusion of all genders, and then the students will vote on the top of their grade, and they'll just be known as royalty or the royalty court. And so we're getting rid of the labels of king and queen just in this progressive time. And all of my board, I'm so privileged to work on this amazing board. All of my exec members are proactive and so progressive, and they've been working really hard on all of this. And actually this morning we had the privilege to meet with our administration. They have their meetings Monday mornings during second hour, and we took a good chunk of their time, but I think they were happy to see some students, and they quote unquote said a little more liveliness is in the room when we're there. So it was a good time to connect with administration, considering I think in the past couple of years we haven't really, at least in my time at the high school, I've never heard of any board meeting with administration, so that was really exciting, and we got amazing feedback from them, and we're very grateful for their support. And we're just gonna kick off this new year really well, and hopefully our snowball dance will go well.
Nothing about your holiday gathering?
Oh, our holiday gathering was amazing. It was at the Drews' household. Oh. And that was at the end of winter break. But I do have to say, Mr. Drews was wearing a Packers jersey, so I wasn't really.
Well, there was a football game that day.
There was a football
Wearing
game. I
green.
do respect that. I am wearing green.
I have a question. So you have no king and queen?
Yes, we're gonna be getting rid of the king and queen and kind of see how it works out. It is definitely a, it's a more traditional part, and unfortunately, we kind of just, a lot of the messages behind it sometimes aren't, people will do a joke vote and like pair up couples who aren't, who don't belong together, and there's been drama and bullying behind it, and so we're trying to get rid of that. And by getting rid of that, we just want to do one person who embodies the Laker way, embodies the pride, respect, and responsibility. So that's what we're encouraging, and we're hoping to get. I know there will probably still be king and queen with prom, so, and that's kind of a more typical, but this is something we're just testing out, and we're hoping it'll go over well.
Be anxious to see how it goes. Thank you. Moving on to future events, we have the MSBA Leadership Conference this week, Thursday and Friday, the 16th and 17th. I'm not sure who's all going. We're all registered to go. And at that time, Stacy will be recognized at the luncheon for the All-State School Board. And if we want to carpool, we should maybe talk about that after the meeting. And then Dr. Stalo alluded to the mentioned the online registration for the 2021 school year's opening on January 16th. Also, that's the end of the second quarter for grades 9 through 12. And there's no school on January 17th for 9 through 12 only. Martin Luther King Day is January 20th. There's no school for everyone. The first day of the third quarter starts on January 21st. End of the second quarter for E8 is only on January 23rd. These are really confusing, so you may want to look on your calendars. On January 21st, there's no school for E8 only. A reminder, on January 27th, we'll be meeting with the local legislators here in the DSC at 5 o'clock. That'll be a dinner meeting. At 6 o'clock, we'll be starting a study session, which will be mostly dedicated to the policies, and we may have someone from MSBA here to discuss board roles and board governance as well. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. So made. By Mary, second.
Second.
By Jonathan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you.